or welcome back. My name is Ava, aka Queen Midas, Life Alchemist, and I'm here for another week of The Body Keeps the Score here on Weekend Book Club. This week you're getting a twofer because last week I had some issues with sound. So if you haven't watched week 3, which I released, what day was that? I think Friday. Make sure you catch up with that because this is the fourth installment. This book is by Bessel Van Der Kolk, MD here. And I do have a link in the description box below if you'd like to purchase your own copy of the book. However, it's not necessary because I am reading through the book here. And yeah, so also my booking link is down below in the description box as well if you'd like to book a tarot reading with me. And also I do have my donation links if you'd like to donate to the channel or send me a birthday gift because it is my birthday coming up. We are in Cancer season right now, so happy birthday to all the Cancers if you've already had your birthday or if there's one coming up. I also have some July specials coming up. I'll be doing something every week and I'm really excited about it. Starting next Friday, I'll be doing live oracle readings. So I will talk a little bit more about that. I think tomorrow I'm going to do a quick channel update video. Yeah, so I'm going to be doing the first Friday, the Friday of the 15th, and then also the last Friday of July as well for live readings. And on my birthday, I'm going to do a giveaway. I'll talk a little bit more about what that's going to be. And then all of the month of July, I will be giving there's going to be a 10% discount on all tarot reads. So it's basically going to be $1 a minute. So an hour for $60 or 30 minutes for $30. And I'm also going to be adding another service, $20 for 2 questions, and that'll be a recorded reading. So I'll send you a video of your reading for 2 questions, and that'll be $20. I'm also in the process of creating a couple products, which I'm going to first test out here on my channel, see kind of what the engagement and how I feel like the energy of it is, like if I like it or not, and then also see if there's a demand for it, and then I'll go from there. But I'm really excited about that. I plan to start using it using both of them by next week. However, it might be sooner. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, so with this being my birthday month starting in July, I just want to give back to you all for being here and supporting me and helping me to get over 500, helping me to get over 500 subscribers, helping me to get my community page, and helping me move toward monetization of the channel as well. And then also for all the awesome clients that I've gotten through my channel as well. So yeah, you all, if you're looking for tarot guidance, please click the link below and book with me. I love working with you all. It's so fun. And I have, I don't know, there's just been some really crazy readings coming through lately. So it's been really cool. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started on week 4. Okie doke. So this is on page 60. The section is called Identifying Danger, the Cook, and the Smoke Detector. Danger is a normal part of life, and the brain is in charge of detecting it and organizing our response. Sensory information about the outside world arrives through our eyes, nose, ears, and skin. These sensations converge in the thalamus, an area inside the limbic system that acts as the cook within the brain. The thalamus stirs all the input from our perceptions into a fully blended autobiographical soup, an integrated, coherent experience of this is what is happening to me. The sensations are then passed on in 2 directions, down to the amygdala, 2 small almond-shaped structures that lie deeper in the limbic system, unconscious brain, and up to the frontal lobes where they reach our conscious awareness. The neuroscientist John de Ledoux calls the pathway to the amygdala, quote unquote, the low road, which is extremely fast, and that to the frontal cortex, the quote unquote high road. which takes several milliseconds longer in the midst of an overwhelmingly threatening experience. However, processing by the thalamus can break down. Sight, sound, smells, and touch are encoded as isolated, dissociated fragments, and normal memory processing disintegrates. Time freezes so that the present danger feels like it will last forever. The central function of the amygdala, which I call the brain smoke detector, is to identify whether incoming input is relevant for our survival. It does so quickly and automatically with the help of feedback from the hippocampus, a nearby structure that relates the new input to past experiences. If the amygdala senses a threat, a potential collision with an oncoming vehicle, a person on the street who looks threatening, it sends an instant message down to the hypothalamus and the brainstem, recruiting the stress hormone system and the autonomic nervous system, ANS, to orchestrate a whole body response. Because the amygdala processes the information, it receives from the thalamus faster than the frontal lobes do. It decides whether incoming information is a threat to our survival even before we are consciously aware of the danger. By the time we realize what is happening, our body may already be on the move. The amygdala's danger signals trigger the release of powerful stress hormones, including cortisol and adrenaline, which increase heart rate, blood pressure, and rate of breathing, preparing us to fight back or run away. Once the danger is past, the body returns to its normal state fairly quickly. But when recovery is blocked, the body is triggered to defend itself, which makes people feel agitated and aroused. While the smoke detector is usually pretty good at picking up danger clues, trauma increases the risk of misinterpreting whether a particular situation is dangerous or safe. You can get along with other people only if you can accurately gauge whether their intentions are benign or dangerous. Even a slight misreading can lead to painful misunderstandings in relationships at home and work. Functioning effectively in a complex work environment or a household filled with rambunctious kids requires the ability to quickly assess how people are feeling and continuously adjusting your behavior accordingly. Faulty alarm systems lead to blowups or shutdowns in response to innocuous comments or facial expressions. Okay, so here there is a picture and it says, the emotional brain first dibs on interpreting incoming information. Sensory information about the environment and body state received by the eyes, ears, touch, kinesthetic sense, etc., converges on the thalamus, where it is processed and then passed on to the amygdala to interpret its emotional significance. This occurs with lightning speed. If a threat is detected, the amygdala sends messages to the hypothalamus to secrete stress hormones to defend against that threat. The neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux calls this the low road. The second neural pathway, the high road, runs from the thalamus via the hippocampus and anterior cingulate to the prefrontal cortex, the rational brain, for a conscious and more refined interpretation. This takes several microseconds longer. If the interpretation of threat by the amygdala is too intense and/or filtering system from the higher areas of the brain are too weak, as often happens in PTSD, people lose control over automatic emergency responses like prolonged startle or aggressive outbursts. So this just shows the movement of the signal after like a stress response. So here is this little depiction, what it's talking about. It says hypothalamus, stress hormones, and then up at the top, sensory input, sight, smell, sound, kinesthetic, etc. So this is just a little, and then there's a prefrontal cortex right here's, right here's the thalamus. So this is just like showing what that paragraph just expressed. Okay, so moving on to the next section, controlling the stress response, the watchtower. If the amygdala is the smoke detector in the brain, think of the frontal lobes and specifically the medial prefrontal cortex, or MPFC, located directly above our eyes as the watchtower, offering a view of the scene from on high. Is that smoke you smell the sign that your house is on fire and you need to get out fast? or is it coming from the stake you put over too high? Oh my God, let me reread that. Is that smoke you smell the sign that your house is on fire and you need to get out fast, or is it coming from the stake you put over too high a flame? The amygdala doesn't make such judgments. It just gets you ready to fight back or escape, even before the frontal lobes get a chance to weigh in with their assessment. As long as you are not too upset, your frontal lobes can restore your balance by helping you realize that you are responding to a false alarm and abort the stress response. Ordinarily, the executive capacities of the prefrontal cortex enable people to observe what is going on, predict what will happen if they take a certain action, and make a conscious choice. Being able to hover calmly and objectively over our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, an ability I'll call mindfulness throughout the book, and then take our time to respond, allows the executive brain to inhibit, organize, and modulate the hardwired automatic reactions pre-programmed into the emotional brain. This capacity is crucial for preserving our relationships with our fellow human beings. As long as our frontal lobes are working properly, we're unlikely to lose our temper every time a waiter is late with our order or an insurance company agent puts us on hold. Our watchtower also tells us that other people's anger and threats are a function to their emotional state, or a function of their emotional state. When that system breaks down, we become like conditioned animals. The moment we detect danger, we automatically go into fight or flight mode. In PTSD, the critical balance between the amygdala smoke detector and the MPFC watchtower shifts radically, which makes it much harder to control emotions and impulses. Neuroimaging studies of human beings in highly emotional states reveal that intense fear, sadness, and anger all increase the activation of subcortical brain regions involved in emotions and significantly reduce the activity in various areas in the frontal lobe, particularly the MPFC. When that occurs, the inhibitory capacities of the frontal lobe break down and people, quote unquote, take leave of their senses. They may startle in response to any sound, become enraged by small frustrations, or freeze when somebody touches them. Effectively dealing with stress depends upon achieving a balance between the smoke detector and the watchtower. If you want to manage your emotions better, your brain gives you two options. You can learn to regulate from the top down or from the bottom up. Knowing the difference between top-down and bottom-up regulation is central for understanding and treating traumatic stress. Top-down regulation involves strengthening the capacity of the watchtower to monitor your body's sensations. Mindfulness, meditation, and yoga can help with this. Bottom-up regulation involves recalibrating the autonomic nervous system, which, as we have seen, originates in the brainstem. We can access the ANS through breath, movement, or touch. Breathing is one of the few body functions under both conscious and autonomic control. In part 5 of this book, we'll explore specific techniques for increasing both top-down and bottom-up regulation. Sorry, y'all. I don't know why I'm like reading all crazy right now. Okay, so there's a picture here that says top down or bottom up. Structures in the emotional brain decide what we perceive as dangerous or safe. There are two ways of changing the threat detection system: from the top down via modulating messages from the medial prefrontal cortex, not just prefrontal cortex, or from bottom up via the reptilian brain through breathing, movement, and touch. So here we see the amygdala and the medial prefrontal cortex, and we see the brain and the direction of messaging due to stress response. This is bottom up, and this is top down here. All right, so we are moving on to the next section called the rider and the horse. For now, I want to emphasize that emotion is not opposed to reason. Our emotions assign value to experiences and thus are the foundation of reason. Our self-experience is the product of the balance between our rational and our emotional brains. When these two systems are in balance, we quote unquote feel like ourselves. However, when our survival is at stake, these systems can function relatively independently. If, say, you are driving along, chatting with a friend, and a truck suddenly looms in the corner of your eye, you instantly stop talking, slam on the brakes, and turn your steering wheel to get out of harm's way. If your instinctive actions have saved you from a collision, you may resume where you left off. Whether you are able to do so depends largely on how quickly your visceral reactions subside to the threat. The neuroscientist Paul MacLean, who developed the three-part description of the brain that I've used here, compared the relationship between the rational brain and the emotional brain to that between a more or less competent rider and his unruly horse. As long as the weather is calm and the path is smooth, the rider can feel in excellent control. But unexpected sounds or threats from other animals can make the horse bolt, forcing the rider to hold on for dear life. Likewise, when people feel that their survival is at stake or they are seized by rages, longings, fear, or sexual desires, they stop listening to the voice of reason, and it makes little sense to argue with them. Whenever the limbic system decides that something is a question of life or death, the pathways between the frontal lobes and the limbic system become extremely tenuous. Psychologists usually try to help people use insight and understandings to manage their behavior. However, neuroscience research shows that very few psychological problems are the result of defects in understanding. Most originate in pressures from deeper regions in the brain that drive our perception and attention. When the alarm bell of the emotional brain keeps signaling that you are in danger, no amount of insight will silence it. I am reminded of the comedy in which a 7-time recidivist in an anger management program extols the virtue of the techniques he's learned. Quote unquote, they are great and work terrific as long as you are not really angry. When our emotional and rational brains are in conflict, as when we're enraged with someone we love, frightened by someone we depend on, or lust after someone who is off limits, a tug of war ensues. This war is largely played out in the theater of visceral experience, your gut, your heart, your lungs, and will lead to both physical discomfort and psychological misery. Chapter 6 will discuss how the brain and viscera interact in safety and danger, which is key to understanding the many physical manifestations of trauma. I'd like to end this chapter by examining 2 more brain scans that illustrate some of the core features of traumatic stress: timeless reliving, re-experiencing images, sounds, and emotions, and dissociation. Okay, so this next section says Stan and Yudi's brains on trauma. One fine September morning in 1999, Stan and Yudi Lawrence, a professional couple in their 40s, set out from their home in London, Ontario, to attend a business meeting in Detroit. Halfway through the journey, they ran into a wall of dense fog that reduced visibility to zero in a split second. Stan immediately slammed on the brakes, coming to a standstill sideways in the highway, just missing a huge truck. An 18-wheeler went flying over the trunk of their car. Vans and cars slammed into them and into each other. People who got out of their cars were hit as they ran for their lives. Goodness. The ear-splitting crashes went on and on. With each jolt from behind, they felt this would be the one that killed them. Stan and Yudi were trapped in their car number 13 of an 87-car pileup. Holy. The worst road disaster in Canadian history. That is wild. All right. Then came the eerie silence. Stan struggled to open the doors and windows, but the 18-wheeler that had crushed their trunk was wedged against the car. Suddenly, someone was pounding on their roof. A girl was screaming, quote unquote, "Get me out of here, I'm on fire." Helplessly, they saw her die as the car she'd been in was consumed by flames. Goodness. The next thing they knew, a truck driver was standing on the hood of their car with a fire extinguisher. He smashed the windshield to free them, and Stan climbed through the opening. Turning around to help his wife, he saw Yudi sitting frozen in her seat. Stan and the truck driver lifted her out, and an ambulance took them to an emergency room. Aside from a few cuts, they were found to be physically unscathed. At home that night, neither Stan nor Yudi wanted to go to sleep. They felt that if they let go, they would die. They were irritable, jumpy, and on edge. That night, and for many to come, they drank copious quantities of wine to numb their fear. They could not stop the images that were haunting them or the questions that went on and on. What if they'd left earlier? What if they hadn't stopped for gas? After 3 months of this, they sought help from Dr. Ruth Linnaeus, a psychiatrist at the University of Western Ontario. Dr. Linnaeus, who had been my student at the trauma center a few years earlier, told Stan and Yudi she wanted to visualize their brains with an fMRI scan before beginning treatment. The fMRI measures neural activity by tracking changes in blood flow in the brain, and unlike the PET scan, it does not require exposure to radiation. Dr. Linnaeus used the same kind of script-driven imagery we had used at Harvard, capturing the images, sounds, smells, and other sensations Stan and Yudi had experienced while they were trapped in the car. Stan went first and immediately went into a flashback, just as Marcia had in our Harvard study. He came out of the scanner sweating, with his heart racing and his blood pressure sky high. "This was just the way I felt during the accident," he reported. "I was sure I was going to die, and there was nothing I could do to save myself." Instead of remembering the accident as something that had happened 3 months earlier, Stan was reliving it. Okay, new section, dissociation and reliving. Dissociation is the essence of trauma. The overwhelming experience is split off and fragmented so that the emotions, sounds, images, thoughts, and physical sensations related to the trauma take on a life of their own. The sensory fragments of memory intrude into the present, where they are literally relived. As long as the trauma is not resolved, the stress hormones that the body secretes to protect itself keep circulating, and the defensive movements and emotional responses keep getting replayed. Unlike Stan, however, many people may not be aware of the connection between their quote unquote crazy feelings and reactions and the traumatic events that are replayed. They have no idea why they respond to some minor irritation as if they were about to be annihilated. Flashbacks and reliving are in some ways worse than the trauma itself. A traumatic event has a beginning and an end, and at some point it is over. But for people with PTSD, a flashback can occur at any time, whether they are awake or asleep. There is no way of knowing when it's going to occur again or how long it will last. People who suffer from flashbacks often organize their lives around trying to protect against them. They may compulsively go to the gym to pump iron, but finding that they are never strong enough, numb themselves with drugs, or try to cultivate an illusory sense of control in highly dangerous situations, like motorcycle racing, bungee jumping, or working as an ambulance driver. Constantly fighting unseen dangers is exhausting and leaves them fatigued, depressed, and weary. If the elements of trauma are replayed again and again, the accompanying stress hormones engrave those memories even more deeply in the mind. Ordinary day-to-day events become less and less compelling. Not being able to deeply take in what is going on around them makes it impossible to feel fully alive. It becomes harder to feel the joys and aggravations of ordinary life, harder to concentrate on the tasks at hand. Not being fully alive in the present keeps them more firmly imprisoned in the past. Triggered responses manifest in various ways. Veterans may react to the slightest cue, like hitting a bump in the road or seeing a kid playing in the street, as if they're in a war zone. They startle easily and become enraged or numb. Victims of childhood abuse may anesthetize their sexuality and then feel intensely ashamed if they become excited by sensations or images that recall their molestation, even when those sensations are the natural pleasures associated with particular body parts. If trauma survivors are forced to discuss their experiences, one person's blood pressure may increase while another responds with the beginnings of a migraine headache. Still, others may shut down emotionally and not feel any obvious changes. However, in the lab, we have no problem detecting their racing hearts and the stress hormones churning through their bodies. These reactions are irrational and largely outside people's control. Intense and barely controllable urges and emotions make people feel crazy and makes them feel they don't belong to the human race. Feeling numb during birthday parties for your kids or in response to the death of loved ones makes people feel like monsters. As a result, shame becomes the dominant emotion and hiding the truth, the central preoccupation. They are rarely in touch with the origins of their alienation. That is where therapy comes in, is the beginning of bringing the emotions that were generated by trauma, being able to feel the capacity to observe oneself online. However, the bottom line is that the threat perception system of the brain has changed and people's physical reactions are dictated by the imprint of the past. The trauma that started, quote unquote, out there is now played out in the battlefield of their own bodies, usually without a conscious connection between what happened back then and what is going on right now inside. The challenge is not so much learning to accept the terrible things that have happened, but learning how to gain mastery over one's internal sensations and emotions. Sensing, naming, and identifying what is going on inside is the first step to recovery. Okay, that is the end of this section. We are going on to the next section now. The next section is called The Smoke Detector Goes on Overdrive. Stan's brain scan shows his flashback in action. This is what reliving trauma looks like in the brain. The brightly lit area in the lower right-hand corner, the blanked out lower left side, and the 4 symmetrical white holes around the center. You may recognize the lit up amygdala and the offline left brain from the Harvard study discussed in chapter 3. Stan's amygdala made no distinction between past and present. It activated just as if the car crash were happening in the scanner, triggering powerful stress hormones and nervous system responses. These were responsible for his sweating and trembling, his racing heart, and elevated blood pressure, entirely normal and potentially life-threatening responses or life-saving responses if a truck has just smashed into your car. It's important to have an efficient smoke detector. You don't want to get caught unawares by a raging fire. But if you go into a frenzy every time you smell smoke, it becomes intensely disruptive. Yes, you need to detect whether somebody is getting upset with you, but if your amygdala goes into overdrive, you may become chronically scared that people hate you, or you may feel like they're out to get you. So here's a scan of Stan's brain when he had the flashback during that trial run. So imaging a flashback with fMRI. Notice how much more activity appears on the right side than the left. So here is the picture. And let me see. How are we gonna focus? Sorry, y'all, okay. The top, what does that say? Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex up there. Oh, prefrontal cortex at the very top, right amygdala, and then lateral nucleus of thalamus down there. So you see how the right side has a lot more lit up than the left side does. Right there. All right, cool. That is the end of that section. We're going on to the next section called The Timekeeper Collapses. Both Stan and Udi had become Sorry, that's like really loud. I'm going to pause that while that keeps going. Okay, we're good. This is called The Timekeeper Collapses. Both Stan and Udi have become hypersensitive and irritable after the accident, suggesting that their prefrontal cortex was struggling to maintain control in the face of stress. Stan's flashback precipitated a more extreme reaction. The 2 white areas in the front of the brain on top of the picture are the right and left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. When those areas are deactivated, people lose their sense of time and become trapped in the moment without a sense of past, present, or future. Interesting. 2 brain systems are relevant for the mental processing of trauma. Those dealing with emotional intensity and context. Emotional intensity is defined by the smoke alarm, the amygdala, and its counterweight, the watchtower, the medial prefrontal cortex. The context and meaning of an experiment are determined by the system that includes the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or DLPFC, and the hippocampus. The DLPFC is located on the side in the front brain, while the MPFC is in the center. The structures along the midline of the brain are devoted to your inner experience of self. Those on the side are more concerned with your relationship with your surroundings. The DLPFC tells us how our present experience relates to the past and how it may affect the future. You can think of it as the timekeeper of the brain. Knowing that whatever is happening is finite and will sooner or later come to an end and makes most experiences knowing that Whatever is happening is finite and will sooner or later come to an end, makes most experiences tolerable. The opposite is also true. Situations become intolerable if they feel interminable. Most of us know from sad personal experience that terrible grief is typically accompanied by the sense that this wretched state will last forever and that we will never get over our loss. Our loss. Trauma is the ultimate experience of quote unquote, this will last forever. Y'all, sorry, I'm really tired today. So we are almost done with this week. So bear with me. Thank you for being here. And I kind of like lost my voice. I had a lot of readings over this week, so I've been doing a lot of talking. So my voice is doing a lot of crazy things right now. But again, thank you for sticking with me. We have a few more pages left to go. Okay, Stan's scan reveals why people can recover from trauma only when the brain structures that were knocked out during the original experience, which is why the event registered in the brain as trauma in the first place, are fully online. Visiting the past in therapy should be done while people are, biologically speaking, firmly rooted in the present and feeling as calm, safe, and grounded as possible. Grounded means that you can feel your butt in your chair, see the light coming through the window, feel the tension in your calves, and hear the wind stirring the tree outside. Being anchored in the present while revisiting the trauma opens the possibility of deeply knowing that the terrible events belong to the past. For that to happen, the brain's watchtower, cook, and timekeeper need to be online. Therapy won't work as long as people keep being pulled back into the past, which makes total sense. Next section called the thalamus shuts down. Look again at the scan of Stan's flashback, and you can see two more white holes on the lower half of the brain. These are his right and left thalamus, blanked out during the flashback as they were during the original trauma. As I've said, the thalamus functions as the quote-unquote cook, a relay station that collects sensations from the eyes, ears, and skin and integrates them into the soup that is our autobiographical memory. Breakdown of the thalamus explains why trauma is primarily remembered not as a story, a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end, but as an isolated sensory imprint. Images, sounds, and physical sensations that are accompanied by intense emotions, usually terror and helplessness. In normal circumstances, the thalamus also acts as a filter or gatekeeper. This makes it a central component of attention, concentration, and new learning, all of which are compromised by trauma. As you sit here reading, you may hear music in the background or traffic rumbling by, or feel a faint gnawing in your stomach telling you it's time for a snack. If you are able to stay focused on this page, your thalamus is helping you distinguish between sensory information that is relevant and information that you can safely ignore. In chapter 19 on neurofeedback, I'll discuss some of the tests we use to measure how well this gating system works, as well as ways to strengthen it. People with PTSD have their floodgates wide open, lacking a filter. They are on constant sensory overload. In order to cope, they try to shut themselves down and develop tunnel vision and hyperfocus. If they can't shut down naturally, they may enlist drugs or alcohol to block out the world. The tragedy is that the price of closing down includes filtering out sources of pleasure and joy as well. Next section is called depersonalization, split off from the self. Let's now look at Yudi's experience in the scanner. Not all people react to trauma in exactly the same way, but in this case, the difference is particularly dramatic. Since Yudi was sitting right next to Stan in the wrecked car, she responded to her trauma script by going numb. Her mind went blank, and nearly every area of her brain showed markedly decreased activity. Her heart rate and blood pressure didn't elevate. When asked how she felt during the scan, she replied, I just felt like I felt at the time of the accident. I felt nothing. So in her picture here, I'm going to show this before I turn the page. It says blanking out or dissociation in response to being reminded of past trauma. In this case, almost every area of the brain has decreased activation, interfering with thinking, focus, and orientation. So this is Yudi's brain after or during the the accident, that big traffic accident. You see, she doesn't have very much lit up in her brain. So if we're talking about the fight, flight, or freeze, this looks like her brain went into freeze mode because she just like completely checked out. Okay. The medical term for UD's response is depersonalization. Anyone who deals with traumatized men, women, or children is sooner or later confronted with blank stares and absent minds. The outward manifestation of the here's my cat, of the biological freeze reaction. Sir. Okay, say hi, Grayson. This is my cat, y'all. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh. The biological freeze reaction. Depersonalization is one symptom of the massive dissociation created by trauma. Stan's flashbacks came from his thwarted efforts to escape the crash, cued by the script. All his dissociated, fragmented sensations and emotions roared back into the present. But instead of struggling to escape, Yudi had dissociated her fear and felt nothing. I see depersonalization regularly in my office when patients tell me of horrendous stories without any feeling. All the energy drains out of the room, and I have to make a valiant effort to keep paying attention. A lifeless patient forces you to work much harder to keep the therapy alive, and I often used to pray for the hour to be over quickly. After seeing Yudi's scan, I started to take a very different approach toward blanked out patients. With nearly every part of their brains tuned out, they obviously cannot think, feel deeply, remember, or make sense of what is going on. Conventional talk therapy in those circumstances is virtually useless. In Yudi's case, it is possible to guess why she responded so differently from Stan. She was utilizing a survival strategy her brain had learned in childhood to cope with her mother's harsh treatment. Yudi's father died when she was 9 years old, and her mother subsequently was often nasty and demeaning to her. At some point, Yuti discovered that she could blank out her mind when her mother yelled at her. 35 years later, when she was trapped in her demolished car, Yuti's brain automatically went to the same survival mode she had made herself disappear. The challenge for people like Yuti is to become alert and enraged, a difficult but unavoidable task if they want to recapture their lives. Yuti herself did recover. She wrote a book about her experiences and started a successful journal called Mental Fitness. This is where a bottom-up approach to therapy becomes essential. The aim is actually to change the patient's physiology, his or her relationship to bodily sensations. At the Trauma Center, we work with such basic measures as heart rate and breathing patterns. We help patients evoke and notice bodily sensations by tapping acupressure points. Rhythmic interactions with other people are also effective, tossing a beach ball back and forth, bouncing on a Pilates ball, drumming, or dancing to music. Numbing is the other side of the coin in PTSD. Many untreated trauma survivors start out like Stan with explosive flashbacks, then numb out later in life. While reliving trauma is dramatic, frightening, and potentially self-destructive, over time, a lack of presence can be even more damaging. This is a particular problem with traumatized children. The acting out kids tend to get attention. The blanked out ones don't bother anybody and are left to those to lose their future bit by bit. Okay, this is the last section in this chapter called Learning to Live in the Present. The challenge of trauma treatment is not only dealing with the past, but even more enhancing the quality of day-to-day experience. One reason that traumatic memories become dominant in PTSD is that it's so difficult to feel truly alive right now. When you can't be fully here, you go to places where you did feel alive, even if the places were filled with horror and misery. Interesting. Many treatment approaches for traumatic stress focus on desensitizing patients to their past, with the expectation that re-exposure to their traumas will reduce emotional outbursts and flashbacks. I believe that this is based on the misunderstanding of what happens in traumatic stress. We must most of all help our patients to live fully and securely in the present. In order to do that, we need to help bring those brain structures that deserted them when they were overwhelmed by trauma back. Desensitize, just a second. Sorry, y'all, my cat was getting into something. He's being like really crazy right now. Okay. I'm not sure where I was, so I'm going to start at the second paragraph. Many treatment approaches for traumatic stress focus on desensitizing patients to their past with the expectation that re-exposure to their traumas will reduce emotional outbursts and flashbacks. I believe that this is based on a misunderstanding of what happens in traumatic stress. We must most of all help our patients to live fully and securely in the present. In order to do that, we need to help bring those brain structures that deserted them when they were overwhelmed by trauma back. Desensitization may make you less reactive, but if you cannot feel satisfaction in ordinary everyday things like taking a walk, cooking a meal, or playing with your kids, life will pass you by. Okay, we're going on to chapter 5, and this is the last couple pages. So it starts out with a quote by Mickey Hart. It says, "Life is about rhythm. We vibrate, our hearts are pumping blood. We are a rhythm machine. That's what we are." And now we're starting the chapter. Toward the end of his career in 1872, Charles Darwin published The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. Until recently, most scientific discussions of Darwin's theories has focused on the Origin of Species, 1859, and The Descent of Man, 1871. But The Expression of the Emotions turns out to be an extraordinary exploration of the foundations of emotional life, filled with observations and anecdotes drawn from decades of inquiry, as well as close-to-home stories of Darwin's children and household pets. It's also a landmark in book illustration, one of the first books ever to include photographs. Photography was still a relatively new technology, and like most scientists, Darwin wanted to make use of the latest techniques to make his points. It's still in print today, readily available in a recent edition with a terrific introduction and commentaries by Paul Ekman, and a modern pioneer in the study of emotions. Darwin starts his discussion by noting the physical organization common to all mammals, including human beings, the lungs, kidneys, brains, digestive organs, and sexual organs that sustain and continue life. Although many scientists today would accuse him of anthropomorphism, Darwin stands with animal lovers when he proclaims man and the higher animals also have instincts in common. All have the same senses: intuition, sensation, passions, affections, and emotions, even the more complex ones such as jealousy, suspicion, emulation, gratitude, and magnanimity. He observes that we humans share some of the physical signs of animal emotion. Feeling the hair on the back of our neck stand up when you're frightened, or baring your teeth when you're enraged, can only be understood as vestiges of a long evolutionary process. When a man sneers or snarls at another in the corner of the canine or eye tooth. Okay, let me reread this. When a man sneers or snarls at another, is the corner of the canine or eye tooth raised on the side facing the man who he addresses? And that's a quote by Charles Darwin in 1872. So this is the picture. You'll see the woman is snarling just like this dog is here. For Darwin, mammalian emotions are fundamentally rooted in biology. They are the indispensable source of motivation to initiate action. Emotions, from the Latin emovere, to move out, give shape and direction to whatever we do, and their primary expression is through the muscles to the face and the body. These facial and physical movements communicate our mental state and intention to others. Angry expressions and threatening postures caution them to back off. Sadness attracts care and attention. Fear signals helplessness or alerts us to danger. We instinctively read the dynamic between two people simply from their tension or relaxation, their postures and tone of voice, their changing facial expressions. Watch a movie in a language you don't know, and you can still guess the quality of the relationship between the characters. We often can read other mammals, monkeys, dogs, horses in the same way. Darwin goes on to observe that the fundamental purpose of emotions is to initiate movement that will restore the organism to safety and physical equilibrium. Here is his comment on the origin of what today we call PTSD. Quote, behaviors to avoid or escape from danger have clearly evolved to render each organism competitive in terms of survival, but inappropriately prolonged escape and avoidance behavior would put the animal at a disadvantage in that successful species preservation demands reproduction, which in turn depends upon feeding, shelter, and mating activities, all of which are reciprocals of avoidance and escape, end quote. In other words, if an organism is stuck in survival mode, its energies are focused on fighting off unseen enemies, which leaves no room for nurture, care, and love. For us humans, it means that as long as the mind is defending itself against invisible insults, our closest bonds are threatened, along with our ability to imagine, play, learn, and pay attention to other people's needs. Darwin also wrote about body-brain connections that we are still exploring today. Intense emotions involve not only the mind, but also the gut and the heart. Heart, guts, and brain communicate intimately via the pneumogastric nerve, a critical nerve involved in the expression and management of emotions in both humans and animals. When the mind is strongly excited, it instantly affects the state of the viscera, so that under excitement, there will be much mutual action and reaction between these, the two most important organs of the body. The first time I encountered this passage, I reread it with growing excitement. Of course, we experience our most devastating emotions as gut-wrenching feelings and heartbreak. As long as we register emotions primarily in our heads, we can remain pretty much in control, but feeling as if our chest is caving in or we've been punched in the gut is unbearable. We'll do anything to make these awful visceral sensations go away, whether it is clinging desperately to another human being, rendering ourselves insensible with drugs or alcohol, or taking a knife to the skin to replace overwhelming emotions with definable sensations. How many mental health problems, from drug addiction to self-injurious behavior, start as attempts to cope with the unbearable physical pain of our emotions? If Darwin was right, the solution requires finding ways to help people alter the inner sensory landscape of their bodies. Until recently, this bidirectional communication between body and mind was largely ignored by Western science, even as it had been long central to traditional healing practices in many other parts of the world, notably in India and China. Today, it is transforming our understanding of trauma and recovery. And that is the end of today. And by the way, the name of this chapter 5, is Body-Brain Connections. I don't think I said that earlier. You all, thank you for bearing with me today. That was a little bit rough, like the reading. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. But yeah, thank you for being here and journeying with me through this book. It's really interesting, and just like some of the things that Dr. Van Der Kolk are found over his medical career. I mean, they make sense to me, but it's just stuff that I guess we don't really think about on a day-to-day basis, especially if we haven't been through severe trauma like some of these people have in this book. So I love that I'm getting to share this with you all and share it with myself at the same time, because it shines light on the fact that we don't really know what other people have been through. We don't understand why their behaviors are certain ways, and it really it leads into just, this is a really big time for us to be compassionate and loving toward people, for us to be doing our own self-work and doing our own healing, and be present in our own soul evolutionary journey, but also to be just mindful and compassionate and loving to everyone around us, because we don't know where they are in their journey. We don't know what they've been through. So yeah, this is really interesting and beautiful to be awakened to some of these things. All right, you all, so that is all for today. I thank you again for being here. If you resonated with this book or you're enjoying the content on my channel, please remember to like the the video. And also, if you have not subscribed to my channel, I would love to invite you to subscribe. It's free. And if you're coming back here to see my videos, and why not? So you all, the more that you like and comment on my videos, it gets us these messages out in front of more people to help them along their soul healing journey. So that's what I'm here for my channel. Is it's all about you, and it's all about helping everybody to just work through their stuff, to alchemize their lives, to dig into the dirty, like the deep, hard things, and just turn them into gold, because we are the healers in our own lives. And you are right here present with me along my healing journey. And I'm just sharing what I'm learning and what I'm going through as I go along, and what I've been through before, and the knowledge I've gained along the way. So again, thank you for being here with me, spiritual warriors. Yeah. What else? Oh, my payment links are down below if you'd like to donate to the channel. Also, again, my booking link is down below if you would like a tarot read, and keep an eye on the community tab. And then also, I'm going to be putting a channel updates video out tomorrow, and it's going to talk about all my July birthday promos. So yeah, thank you all so much. And if nobody has told you today, I love you. And remember that you are sovereign, powerful, worthy, and loved. Thank you. Bye.
Every day is a gift.